أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, brothers and sisters, after it's been probably a 4 maybe 5 week hiatus, and so I pray everyone is well, inshallah. Alhamdulillah, brothers and sisters, as I'm sure you're all aware, we'll be discussing today, we'll be having the talk on the Islamic Golden Age by none other than Dr. Wajid Akhter. And hopefully Dr. Wajid Akhter can take us through the Islamic Golden Age, some of the key lessons we can derive, and at least the inspiration, especially to carry us through our next few weeks in university, as well as exam season that is coming up, as well as the world after, and just generally striving in our studies and education. To begin, inshallah, we'll begin with a recitation from the Holy Quran. Whenever you do.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقترب للناس حسابهم وهم في غفلة معرضون ما يأتيهم من ذكر من ربهم محدث إلا استمعوه وهم يلعبون لاهية قلوبهم وأسروا النجوى الذين ظلموا هل هذا إلا بشر مثلكم أفتأتون السحر وأنتم تبصرون قال ربي يعلم القول في السماء والأرض وهو السميع العليم بل قالوا أضغاث أحلام بل افتراه بل هو شاعر فليأتنا بآية كما أرسل الأولون ما آمنت قبلهم من قرية أهلكناها أفهم يؤمنون وما أرسلنا قبلك إلا رجالا نوحي إليهم فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون وما جعلناهم جسدا لا يأكلون الطعام وما كانوا خالدين ثم صدقناهم الوعد فأنجيناهم ومن نشاء وأهلكنا المسرفين.
Jazakallah khairan, bro, for that beautiful recitation. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to accept your recitation. So alhamdulillah, brothers and sisters, today we have with us none other than Dr. Wajid Akhter, and I believe the name alone is an introduction. But of course I'll give the proper introduction, inshallah. So Dr. Wajid is a GP principal in Essex, and he's the Vice President of the British Islamic Medical Association. And he's also a medical tutor in social media and Islam and history in the Barts Medical School. And as I'm sure we're all aware of, and perhaps where most of us know him from, is being the founder as well as a current board member of Charity Week. And as a reminder, alhamdulillah, this year, I believe Queen Mary, after a while, did the best this year in Charity Week, alhamdulillah. Brothers and sisters, of course, you're watching from YouTube, so if you have any questions during the talk, please do leave them in the comments, inshallah, and Dr. Wajid can after answer them, inshallah. So without further ado, actually I can pass on to Dr. Wajid.
Jazakallah khairan. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ashraf al-anbiya al-mursalin nabiyana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim wa ilayhi tasliman jami'an kathira. Jazakallah khairan, brothers and sisters, for giving me a chance to say a few words about the golden age of Islam. So I guess the first and the most important question is why? Why are we talking about the golden age of Islam? Of course, we're Muslims, and it's normal for Muslims to want to talk about the golden age. In fact, I was obsessed with it when I was growing up because the reality around us is not very nice. What we see when we look at the news, when we go on social media, is not just depressing, it's haunting. It's very, very, very difficult to be a Muslim these days and see what's going on everywhere, whether it's abroad, whether it's internally, whether it's the state of our own communities. It's very difficult. And so, when you're faced with such a difficult picture, it's natural to want to go and find a happier time, a happier place, a time when we weren't the punch bag, a time when we weren't the most illiterate people in the world, a time when we weren't the majority of the world's refugees, a time when we were giving to humanity rather than the ones who always seem to be on the receiving end. So it's normal to want to talk about a golden age. But I could tell you all day long about the golden age. I could tell you about how amazing it was. I could tell you about the beautiful buildings. I could tell you about how we were the most advanced people when it came to astronomy. I could tell you how we were the most advanced people when it came to medicine. I could tell you about how we developed the very concept of the modern hospital called the Bimaristan. I could tell you how we developed architecture to a degree that has never been seen before, built beautiful buildings, the Taj Mahal, the Alhambra, so many different things that we have done, that we have built, are amazing. I could tell you about how a Khalifa could showcase his power while on Hajj in Mecca by saying, "I'm thirsty." And within hours, he has a crushed ice drink in his hand. You guys might think, what's the big deal about a crushed ice drink? But more than 1,000 years ago, how were they? There's no refrigerators. How is ice going to travel across the desert? If I gave you a cube of ice from wherever it is in the mountains and told you, now take that ice on Umrah and make sure it doesn't melt, would you be able to do it? You wouldn't. But they were able to do it back then. I could tell you about how they communicated and they developed the forerunner of what we call the modern postal system. I could tell you so many different things. I could tell you about how 2/3 of the stars in the sky, 2/3, are named after Muslims. Did you know that? Why? Why are 2/3 of the stars in the skies named after Muslims? In fact, even on the moon, if you look at so many of the craters, many of them are named after Muslims. Do you know why? It's the same reason why American websites are .com and not .co.us. Here in the UK, any website will be .co.uk, right? And in Italy, it'll be .co.it. And in India, it'll be .co.in. But in America, it's not .co.us, it's just .com. Why? Because if you discover something, you get to name it. If you discover it, you have the naming rights. Just like every country in the world has to put their name on a postage stamp. So if you didn't put your name on it, how in the world would anyone know where this letter is coming from or where it's going? But one country doesn't have to put its name on any of its stamps. This country, if you look at any English stamp, it never says England, UK, or anything like that. It just has the Queen's head on it sometimes. Why? Because if you discover it, you get to name it, you get to keep it. Everyone else has to put their name around it. So we discovered the stars. 2/3 of them were discovered by Muslims. So we got to name them. And that's why they're named after Muslims. But you're not here to hear about that golden age, because even after you finish listening to a story about the golden age, once this talk is over, you're back in the mud. You're back right where we are right now. So what I want to do very, very quickly is tell you a few of the lessons that I learned from the golden age. I want you, when you look at this picture of Messi celebrating scoring a goal for Barcelona, do you want to be this guy? or would you like to be this guy? Simple question. Do you want to hear about and look at the Golden Age? Or do you want to help bring about the Golden Age again? If you want to be this guy, if you want to help, inshallah, bring back the Golden Age of Islam, then this is the right talk for you. I've read many, many books on the Golden Age, and I've brought together some of the lessons, just some of the lessons in no particular order, that I think if you even take a few of them, inshallah, we'll be one step closer to that Golden Age of Islam. Number one, the value of knowledge. Like I said, it's not in any particular order, but the value of knowledge. Everywhere you go, every single thing you read, try to see if you can find a proof and evidence for Islam there. And if you look for it, you will find it. There is no other religion that places the value of knowledge up there in the faith as much as Islam does. No other faith, I don't think, does that. Some people will debate maybe this, that, and the others. There's literally from our first word, Iqra, but it goes on beyond that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeatedly gives us advice to think, to ponder, to reflect. فَذَكِّرْ إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ you know, like فَذَكِّرْ, right? Then think, ponder, reflect. And not just on what? Think, ponder, reflect only on the Quran? No, on the world around you, on nature, on the sky, on the way the animals are. Think. Think on even the little things. There's no other religion that places the value on knowledge. And to give you an idea of how much value is placed on knowledge, there are so many stories I could tell you. You could do a whole talk on that. But suffice it to say that in a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ said words to the effect, this is not a verbatim quote, that the person who tries to read the Quran and learn the Quran but stutters, is struggling because of the language, is struggling because it's not their language, their mother tongue. They will get what? Will they get half the reward? Will they get double the sin because they're not reading it properly? No. They will get double the reward. Double the reward, because the harder it was to gain that knowledge, the more difficult it was to take on board that knowledge, the more reward you get. No other religion does this. So Islam makes knowledge valuable. It is valuable to be intelligent. We value intelligence. We do not value stupidity. We do not value ignorance. We value intelligence. We value knowledge. Not just what knowledge of the deen, but knowledge of all things. And Islam teaches us that there is no great war between faith and science. Like in other religions, because they tell you that if you're Galileo and you came up with these crazy ideas, and if you're Copernicus and you came up with these ideas, then we're going to arrest you and we're going to persecute you and we're going to treat you bad. So they had to leave their faith. They had to reject their faith, or they had to hide their faith for the sake of science, or vice versa. So other religions needed a renaissance sometimes. They needed to put aside their faith because their faith was anti-science, anti-learning. Whereas Islam has never been like that. From day one, it has been a marriage between the two. There's no contradiction. Science is another way for us to appreciate and worship Allah even better. Right? It's not a way of us leaving Islam. So one of the beautiful things that you'll see is that many of the Muslim scientists who brought about the Golden Age, they were also scholars of Islam. Almost invariably, they were hafiz of Quran, or they had known large parts of the Quran and they had studied it in detail, because there was no separation between science and faith. These are twin parts of the same aim, inshallah. So when you do that, you give the human being a much better grounding. And we've seen that, with our earlier generations, with a lot of the Muslims who came here in the 1970s, 1960s, 1950s, they might be in really good jobs. They might be professors of so-and-so in the university, and they might have great jobs. But then you look at them, they're not very, like they're very far away from the deen, because they come from a time and a culture where everything Islamic was retrogressive, everything was Islamic was bad. So they felt they had to leave their faith behind in order to progress in their careers. Whereas now more and more you see people, mashallah, who are able to understand that there is no contradiction between faith and science. And more, honesty was a huge bedrock of Islamic Golden Age. What do I mean by honesty? Many of you will see as you progress in your careers that you will be asked to do shady things, or shady things will be done to you in your career. You will work really, really hard on a project, and at the last minute, your boss will come along, or your supervisor, and will add their name at the front. They did nothing. They didn't help you, they didn't supervise you, they didn't do nothing. But they can add their name because they've got the power to do that. And vice versa. The journals, you have to enter the journal, but you have to pay this much to get into the journal. It's all, there's a lot of intellectual dishonesty in the scientific field. There's a lot of people making up things, as we see with the anti-vaxxer stuff that's going around. And what happens is that the scientific community is a cutthroat community. Companies fighting each other just to get that little bit of an edge. People, industrial espionage. And at a normal level, people always just trying to get one up to get in their career. In Islam, it was different. I'm generalizing, but it was different. Think of what is the common denominator between Ibn Rushd, Ibn Sina, Ibn Haytham, Ibn Nafis? What is the common denominator between all these guys? It's Ibn, right? We don't know we do know their real names, but you don't know them by their names. You know them by their fathers' names. You know them by their fathers' names because credit goes to their dad. Credit goes to their father, their parents. Credit goes to their city, Al-Bukhari, right? Al-Khwarizmi. It goes to their country, because it's a way of being honest and saying, I am not a genius. I am not Einstein. I fell from the heavens, and that I came up with all these great ideas, and I was born in an intellectual vacuum. No, I am the product of other people. If it wasn't for my father, I would not be who I am today. If it was not for my teachers, I would not be who I am today. It will remind you to be ever humble and to invest in the next generation, because they will be Ibn you, right? It's this honesty. When Muslims took from another civilization, what do other civilizations do? When they took from another civilization, they erased it and they put their name on it. Columbus discovered America. Really, he discovered America. Who was living there before? No one? Was it a vast, desolate wasteland? You have to discover it? Come on, that's not honesty. That's arrogance. And people who are arrogant are exactly the kind of people who are going to end up in America and think they're in India. But that's not who we were. In the Islamic Golden Age, we took from the Indians and we called it Sifr Hindi, the zero of India. We took from the Greeks and we called Tib Yunani, the medicine of the Greeks. We named things after who it came from because we didn't come up with it. We may have taken it, we may have expanded it, we may have changed it, but they came up with the idea. This, when you have an honest society, a collaborative, honest society, where people are not only in it for their own selves, and they accept that they are a product of others, and that things come from other places and they're learning from them, then people are more willing to grow. They're more willing to invest, because you know that you're going to get your due and you're not going to just get it taken away from you. Diversity, of course, Muslims were the originals, right? Let me give you a story. And I know my time is coming up to an end, so I'll be very quick. Lady Montagu was the wife of the British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire. And she was rich, she was friends with the queen, she was powerful. And she saw when she was there that the Muslims, the Turks, they would not get smallpox. Smallpox is a disease that would cover people, especially their face, in these like chickenpox things, which are even worse than chickenpox. And many times it would kill. So it would kill millions, not 100,000, millions of children a year. And those it didn't kill would be left with scars for life, horrible scars on their face. And it wasn't rare, it was a very common disease. But she saw that the Muslims weren't being affected. Why? They were taking a thorn and they were putting it into the cow, and then they were into cowpox, which is very similar to smallpox, but it's not fatal and doesn't cause the same problems to human beings. So they were putting a thorn into the cowpox and then a thorn into themselves. So they didn't catch smallpox because their body was able to recognize cowpox, and when smallpox came, it was able to recognize that as well and fight it off. What is that? What is that? That's variolation. That's like vaccination, right? So she saw it and she came back to England and she told everyone, guys, let's do this. Let's get rid of smallpox. And no one listened to her. Why did no one listen to her? Even though she was rich and she was powerful and she knew the queen, but no one listened to her. Why did no one listen to her? Because she was a woman. And they said, we'll be damned before we listen to any woman about science. Don't care how smart or how intelligent or how rich you are. You have nothing to do with science. Shh, go away. And they ignored her until literally at the point after she died, many decades later, a guy called Edward Jenner turns around, discovers the same thing and said, hey guys, if you take some cowpox, if you take a thorn, you put it into cowpox and then you put it into yourself, you could get cowpox and that might stop you getting smallpox. And they said, you, sir, are the founder of vaccination. Vax comes from the word cow, French word for cow. And we will make a statue to you and we will put your name as the father of vaccination, and we will hail you as a genius of humanity. And even the bloody cow, even the cow, if you go to St. George's Medical School, which is my old medical school, the actual cow skin is there in the library, preserved. Everything but the woman, right? Lady Mary is just like, she's gone. Who cares? Nobody needs to know about her. What were Muslims doing? Many hundreds of years before that, Fatima al-Fihri was building the world's first university. And what many people don't know is that her sister built another university literally 2 minutes down the road from Qarawin. That's what when we were in the Golden Age, it was not just the men. It was the women, it was Arab, it was non-Arab, it was white, it was black, it was slaves and the masters. It was a whole civilization. It wasn't just a few rich, Arab dudes at the top. Everyone. Obviously, I'm not condoning slavery here, but you know what I mean? We're talking about diversity. If you want to have a golden age, you need to have everyone involved in the golden age. And the last two parts, we had a challenger spirit. Challenger spirit means that you don't just take what other people give you. So the opposite of a challenger spirit is when I get a phone and I say, wow, isn't the iPhone amazing? These guys are fantastic. I could never come up with anything like that. I'm not even gonna try. Fantastic. I just take. A challenger spirit would be to say, this is cool. I think I could do it better. Let me try. I'm gonna come up with a better way to make a mobile phone. I'm gonna come up with a better way to drive a car. I'm gonna come up with a better way to fly an airplane, etc., etc. The Muslims had this challenger spirit. They took things from other people and they were like, how can we do this better? How can we understand it better? A great example is someone called Ibn Nafis. Ibn Nafis was, amongst other things, he was a doctor, a Muslim doctor. And the greatest doctor of antiquity, the one that everyone knows about, is someone called Galen. Galen, Galen. He's a Greek physician. I mean, this guy was untouchable, right? It was, he came up with the idea of like the human body is made up of 4 humors. There's the phlegm and there's blood and there's mud and so on, different things. And he came up with all these ideas and no one challenged him. And he said that the blood in the heart, there's blood that has oxygen and there's blood that doesn't have oxygen. And the great mystery for humanity was, how did the blood without the oxygen get the oxygen? What happened? And Galen said, well, it's clear. In the heart, there's a wall in between, right in the middle, and through small holes that the human eye cannot see, the blood that does not have the oxygen goes to the other side and it gets the oxygen. And everyone is like, Galen said it must be true, for a millennia. Until this guy Ibn Nafis comes along and he goes, no, that doesn't make sense. In fact, I've tried it, I've done an experiment, and I can't see there's any way that the blood from the one side can go to the other. So he came up, he goes, what probably happens is that the blood goes into the lungs, gets the oxygen there, then comes back into the other side. So it never actually goes from one side to the other. It goes through the lung system, what we call the pulmonary circulation. And that's correct. He came up with that idea 400 years before William Harvey, which if you read any medical textbook, they'll say William Harvey discovered it. But this is the cool thing. When Ibn Nafis discovered that the greatest doctor in history ever was wrong, right? I mean, this is the time. If it was us, I would like straight away, first thing, like Instagram profile, did you know? By the way, man's just found out that Einstein E is not equal MC squared, E is MC cubed. I'm a genius, hold the press, etc., etc. He wrote it down like this. He goes, the blood does not travel to the other side through small holes or pores. It goes by the circulatory system, not through small holes or pores, as some people have said in the past. So he didn't even gloat about it. He didn't even mention Galen by name. Why? Out of respect. Because that guy did whatever he did 1,000 years ago. He did what he did, and he came up with so many good ideas. And just because I found he was wrong in one, I don't need to name and shame him. I don't need to make a big deal about it. I'm just going to say, as some people have said in the past this, and I found the other opposite. Khalas, no big deal. That's class, and that's the challenger spirit. And even the scientific method and repeatability, all these things have come from Muslims. One of the last things I'll tell you about is called interdisciplinary wisdom. One of the things that you'll find from the Golden Age, things like the Bayt al-Hikmah, the House of Wisdom. What was it about the House of Wisdom that made it the House of Wisdom? Why wasn't another building the House of Wisdom? The thing that made it the House of Wisdom is that in this building, you had translators, you had Jews, you had Christians, you had Muslims, you had Zoroastrians or fire worshippers, you had Islamic scholars, you had religious scholars, you had scholars of hadith, you had astronomers, you had mathematicians, you had medics, you had everyone in one building. And if you have everyone in one building, what happens is you start to learn from each other. You meet each other in the hallway. You bump into each other. You have different discussions. And when the greatest advancements of science and civilization happens where? When in the overlap between two things, in the overlap. They don't happen in the middle, they happen on the edges, right? And you can see that in the new headquarters for Apple. Apple built a new headquarters for themselves in Cupertino, California. If you can check it online, I should have put a picture in. And this headquarters is a circle. And the reason they made it a circle is that they've designed the entire headquarters so that it maximizes the number of times that people from different departments in Apple can meet each other. Walking in a hallway, driving into the car park, in the canteen, the toilets, wherever it is, you will meet different people in different ways because of the design of the building, because they acknowledge that the greatest advancements and scientific ideas all come from random chance meetings like this. When two disciplines collide, that's cool. And Muslims did that a huge amount. Every single Muslim physician or scholar or historiographer like Ibn Khaldun, they all wore multiple hats. None of them was a one-trick pony. All of them wore multiple hats, and they were able to do these cool things because they wore these multiple hats. So, my brothers and sisters, I'll finish on this point, inshallah. The Muslims definitely had a golden age, and it was very, very golden indeed. It was so golden that it might blind you when you look at it. If you go into the depths, it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing what you find out. One non-Muslim author wrote that if it wasn't for the Mongol destruction, the Hulagu Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, if it wasn't for the Mongol destruction of Baghdad, then humanity would probably have reached the moon about 200 to 400 years earlier than we did. The way Muslim civilization was advancing, the way the Muslim civilization was just going for it until it was crashed, until it was destroyed, until it was brought down to earth, was amazing. And if we want to bring it back, then learn about it, but copy it. Take the lessons. You might not be able to take all of them, but take some of them. The humility, the interdisciplinary working, honesty in giving other people credit where credit is due, the ability to have that challenger spirit, all these things, if you're able to have any one of those, then you are helping rebuild back our golden age. A scholar was once asked, where is Islam and who are the Muslims? And his answer was, Islam is in the books and the Muslims are in the ground. Islam, true Islam, if you want to see it, then go read the books, because that's where it's hidden. And the Muslims, the real Muslims, the ones that are not going to let you down, the ones who have done amazing things for this ummah, for humanity, for civilization, are in the ground now. Let's change that, inshallah. Let's make sure that when the next time someone asks a scholar that question, they can say, Islam is here in the world. You can see it around you, and the Muslims are these people. Jazakallah khairan. Subhanallah alhamdulillah nastaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Subhanallah alhamdulillah nastaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Wajid, for that. Really different. So I had a picture of how the session was going to go, but you took in a very different direction. You talked about the etiquettes and the disciplines that our predecessors had in history. And so a few questions have come in, and I'll just read them. We'll go over them one by one, inshallah. And the first question is, why is it that a lot of our history, especially the Golden Age, is forgotten by a lot of Muslims?
By Muslims or by non-Muslims?
By Muslims, by a lot of Muslims. Why is it forgotten?
We're not very good at history in general, because just like we're not very good at anything, right? Are we good at what are we good at? Science? We're good at maths? Can you name me one Muslim car in the whole world? Can you name me one Muslim mobile phone? Can you name me one Muslim invention, like apart from Pfizer, that Turkish couple, thank God, they did something, we're not very good at much, let's be honest. So we're not very good at telling our history. You could see the way that they teach history here. They're not good at it either, but they've got horrible histories. They preserve their palaces. They've got a lot of things of their history preserved, right? Go back, you guys. You must go back to wherever you're from. How much of our history is preserved? I mean, it's crumbling. We don't know the stories. So we need to tell our story a little bit better. And inshallah, I think there are a new generation that's coming through, that's telling that story, that's giving us that passion again. You'll find it online, and you'll find different. I don't want to name specific scholars or specific groups, but you'll find stuff inshallah online. And if it isn't there, Bismillah, that means it's an open road for you.
Our next question is, what material would you recommend that's out there to learn authentic Islamic history?
There's many, but there's a really good book. I'll just grab the book so you guys can actually see it. So I think some of these books are a little bit heavy, but this one is 1001 Inventions. Many of you have heard about it, and you can find a good video about it online. And what has been done by Professor Salim Al-Hassani and his team is beautiful. It's really like lots of pictures, which is nice, right? Everyone loves a good picture. But he literally just goes, it's just 1 page or 2 pages per thing. So you don't have to read the whole book. You can just pick up anything, open anywhere, and read 1 page, and you learn something. You're like, oh wow, we did this, we did that. We came up with the idea of coffee. We came up with the prism, all these things. So I would say that would be a really good 1001 Inventions. Would be a really good place to start, inshallah. There are others out there, but that would be a really good place, inshallah.
Our next question is, how do you see us as university students contributing to the next Islamic Golden Age?
Brothers and sisters, you're at Queen Mary's, right? 45% of this ummah is illiterate. So you're already in the top 50%, right? You're in the top half because you're not illiterate. And out of those 50%, how many of them who are just literate, but they can't go to university? So you're already in the top 10%, because the majority of the ummah has never been to university, right? And out of those 10%, how many of them have been to a university that is in the top 200 in the world? If you need to know, literally, I think there's probably like 3 Muslim universities in the top 200 in the world, right? So you guys are already in the top 200 universities in the world. Out of those, Queen Mary's is in the top 20 universities in the world, right? It's one of the top 20 universities in the world. So you guys are getting an education. You are the elite of the ummah, not Muslims in the UK, of the ummah as a whole. You are the elite educated. You might not feel like that, the day before your exam, but you are. So, like, are you expecting some guys dying of starvation and, in Indonesia to come up with the Islamic Golden Age? Are you expecting an orphan child in Somalia to come up with the Golden Age? Are you expecting someone who's, a refugee in the Syrian camp to come up with a Golden Age? They can only think about their stomach right now or their safety. But you guys can think about a little bit more. If the Golden Age is going to come, if it's not going to be you guys, then we're just going to have to wait a bit longer. But this is what I'm trying to tell you guys in this talk. Don't just look at it. It's up to you now. No pressure.
So this one question came in from so I'll come to that actually after. What Islamic history is there that's not about science, but more about the arts and the humanities?
So a lot of our Islamic history is about arts and humanities. And again, if you read this, it's about both. But for example, I'll give you an example. Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun is the father of historiography. Literally, the man who they will say is like the father of studying history. Because before him, it was just like, what's history? It's whatever story someone told, right? My grandma told me a story, that's history, right? Somebody else's grandma told him his story, and that's history. Like, is there a way of telling? Like King Arthur, right? Is there a way of telling that that's real or not? We have no idea. Ibn Khaldun was a judge, like a legal, qadi. And he was like, and he loved history. So he was like, you know what? I'm going to do this properly. Where are your sources? Let's check this, blah, 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 blah. This is art. The art of calligraphy, the art of the architecture. This is all Muslims, like we have contributed a huge amount to this. So if you read these books, it's not just sciences, it's science and art. And actually in Islam, there was a flow, right? You would have someone who was a hardcore mathematician, right? Who was also a poet. Khayyam. Everyone knows Khayyam for what? Rubiyat, for poetry. He was also one of the greatest mathematicians who ever lived. So in Islam, again, it's these kind of things where people say you're arts and you're science. You're religious or you're secular. You're evidence-based or you're faith-based. And it's like, no, we don't, that's not how Islam works. Islam is like, you do both. Because otherwise there's no balance.
Just one last question, inshallah. So we have our exam season coming up quite soon, like in a couple of weeks. What piece of advice can you give to us to strive through this period and make the best use of this time?
I'll give you the advice my father gave me. I was studying for my exams. I think this GCSE a long time ago, and I wasn't paying attention as usual. It's difficult, concentrating. It's not going in. You read the same thing. It's boring. It's literally anything becomes interesting except that. Suddenly, like, I start thinking about everything. I start thinking about, do I need to get my hair cut? What happens if I do this? Like, everything becomes interesting because I just want to avoid studying. And my father told me something. He said, if you don't study hard, someone is going to die. And I was like, are you going to kill me? Because that's what my first thought was. Probably, like, if I don't say, are you going to murder me? And it was like, yeah, that maybe. But the reason why someone will die is because if you don't study hard, then you're not going to get a good grade. And if you don't get a good grade, you're not going to get into a good university. And if you don't get a good university or a good degree, you're not going to be able to get a good job. If you don't get a good job, you're not going to be able to get a good salary. And if you don't get a good salary, you won't be able to pay a good amount in zakat or sadaqah. And if you're not able to do that, somebody will be missing out on that money, on that sadaqah. And for them, that money was the difference between whether or not their daughter got married, the difference between whether or not their children went to sleep hungry that night, the difference between life and death. And he told me, and I remember it till now, he said, they don't deserve to die because you couldn't be bothered to do your work. And wallahi al-azim, from the day he told me that, because until that point, I was studying for myself. I was studying to pass an exam. But from the day he told me that, I realized that I'm not studying for myself. I'm not working for myself. I'm working for them. And if I work a little bit harder, maybe I'll save one more life. If I put in a few more hours, then maybe one less child will go to sleep hungry. When I was visiting my grandparents in India, and this old man, he was like bent over, like he shouldn't be like out of his home, but he couldn't even afford a stick. Came and he was just like asking for he's just begging. So my grandfather said, give him a bag of rice. A bag of rice, you can buy it in Tesco's, give him a bag of rice. And the man sat down and he started crying. And, we rushed him and said, what's wrong? And he just raised his hand. He said, because you've given me this bag of rice, I have 2 daughters. We're so poor, but because you've given me this bag of rice, she will be able to get married. Like it's just meant so much for us. And we said, well, if you have 2 daughters here, take a second bag of rice, take some. This is how much a difference a bag of rice makes to someone's life. It changed his life around. It changed his daughter's life around. So when you're studying, don't study for yourself. Don't study to pass an exam. Study because your ummah is waiting for you. Your ummah is crying, they're dying, they're struggling, they're surviving by their fingernails, and they're waiting for you to do something to help them. Study because you want to smash that exam, inshallah, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts ajr and barakah in your life and your energy and your time, so that you can get out there and you can start helping them, inshallah. So not just with your zakat, that's the least that you owe them, but with your sadaqah and with your intellect, with the wisdom that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you to pass that exam, you use that to help them, inshallah. You use that to save the brothers and sisters who are leaving Islam. You save them, inshallah. You drag them back, inshallah, bi'iznillah. You help the ones that who are not being inspired, to inspire them to be better Muslims, and you help yourself. Study for that, and then you will find there's no procrastination. Then you will find that 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. they mean nothing to you. Then you will find, inshallah, that it doesn't matter what you say, the words will stick into your brain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put barakah and ajr in your time and your effort and your knowledge. And when you pass and when you succeed, you won't be happy just for yourself, you'll be happy for all the others. Then you will see, inshallah, what the real benefit is. So that's my advice. All the strategies aside, there's so many different strategies you can use, but if you change why you're studying, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put barakah in the reason why.
Jazakallah khairan. Very, very inspiring, very powerful advice. Jazakallah khairan, Dr. Wajid. We hope to host you again soon, inshallah.
The honor is mine, brothers and sisters. You guys, Queen Mary's, mashallah, you guys are an amazing Islamic society. I've known you guys for many decades now, alhamdulillah. And it's always an inspirational group of brothers and sisters to come. And I pray, inshallah, that group becomes bigger and bigger until there are more Muslims in the Islamic society than there are outside it. That's my dream one day. One brother told me, you guys don't even remember this guy, president from many generations ago. I asked him, how many Muslims are there in the Islamic society? He goes, we sign up 2,000. But the majority of Muslims outside. He goes, one day, it will be difficult to find the Muslim that we haven't not only signed up, but is active, inshallah. He goes, I don't know when that day is, but we're working for that day. And I said, I said, inshallah, we wait for that day and we hope that we see it with our own eyes, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. It's such an honor and a blessing to have you. And
I mean, same as you.
This talk on the Islamic Golden Age. Jazakallah khair, brothers and sisters, for attending today's talk on the Islamic Golden Age. We pray that Allah makes your time in university successful and that you're inspired by the lessons that we have learned today. Please do keep up to date with our emails and our social media for any further announcements. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.